Hey everyone, hope you're well. My name is Metalia. For those of you who are new here, I go by the name Misguided Pilgrim. I normally make videos about philosophy, politics, history, and sometimes about religion, particularly theology and psychology. However, in some of my videos, I have also shown glimpses of my personal life, my musings. Like I talk about my spiritual journey and a bit about my background, my Chinese Indonesian background, and how I navigate my identity in Australia, here in Melbourne. So, when you look at the title of the video, it's understandable that some of you might feel confused or even just probably wondering why I'm posting something that sounds so personal on a public space like YouTube. Um, um, Now, I want to clarify some potential misunderstandings and I want to address them why it's not so. So, you might be thinking that I'm posting about it because I want to rant about my past relationship, what exactly happened, the mistakes I did, he did, or whatsoever. But that's not the case. The reason why I want to upload this video is because I want this video to be like a piece of advice or a lesson for those of you who had been in a relationship or have never been in a relationship before, but thinking of jumping into one or approaching one, and you're not sure where exactly to start, right? And human relationships, whatever it is, friendships, relationships, they're complicated, There's a lot of reading between the lines. There's a lot of significance that's often unspoken. There's a lot of actions or lack of action that each of us, each person committed or commit in a relationship or friendship that is based on the subconscious. And most of the time we don't even realize that, right? And so I want to share this video in hopes of enlightening you guys, and share with you what I've learned from my experience of being in a 4-year relationship in the past. So, of course, just like any other relationships, there's pros and cons. It's not all about, you know, it's not all filled with sunshine and butterflies, right? And at the stage where you're comfortable in a relationship, you start to get used to each other. Sometimes the habits that you notice of your partner or your boyfriend or girlfriend or whoever, or of yourself, might start to annoy you or your partner, right? And so the point is that you might be thinking 4 years it's quite a long time. Some people have already probably gotten engaged or married after the first year or the second year of being in a long-term relationship. But I don't think that's necessarily true. Some people can date for 7 years, maybe because their relationship was casual for a long time, because maybe they live apart from each other, they're still testing the waters, and finally they decide to tie the knot and get married. Or there are many stories as to why people date for a certain period of time. And well, as for me, in my past relationship, which honestly, it was a bit of a train wreck, it wasn't that bad, but it was a train wreck, and it was filled with a roller coaster of emotions on, I would assume, both our parts, is because the conflicts never felt like they were quite resolved. They were always, like, whenever, mostly me, honest, honestly. Like, whenever I try to confront my ex about the problems within the relationship and what could be fixed and what's, the potential, what are his goals for the future, he was often clueless. He was often in this sort of catatonic mode where he would kind of shut down for a sec and just not even know what to say. And I think that was just a sort of one of the trigger points for me, where I was like, oh, I think I'm starting, I was starting to question, like, why was I even with this guy, right? And some of you who have known me personally, or just got to know me, or just gotten to know me, like, some of you might not even know that I was in a relationship, because I was afraid, I was reluctant to disclose it. I was reluctant to disclose it because I never really see it as a relationship. Relationships to me, even with the ups and downs, strive on, respect, right? And a shared kind of trajectory for the future. And so I felt like there was almost none of that, He did witness, when we were together, he did witness my daily life. He did witness my routines. When I'm at home or whenever I'm with my friends, like, I kind of used to update him on, on who I was hanging out with and what I find good or bad about this person. I would tell him almost everything, right? I mean, not everything to the point where, like, I'm like an open book, but it was everything, like, whatever I felt sad or uncomfortable or angry or joyful about, I used to tell him. But I think one of the points, which I want to address here, when you, like, what I learned after the end of my 4-year relationship with my ex, was knowing that commitment isn't just a feeling. He used to tell me that, oh, back then, like, weeks before breaking up, he used to tell me that there used to be a sense of commitment when he and I were together. When we were happy with each other, we used to spend a lot of time with each other. He would be invited me to a lot of places. We saw each other more frequently. But I think commitment, personally, for me, it's a choice, right? It's about taking the next step, the responsibility for not just you, and also, well, for both of you, right? That's what commitment is. It's about the commitment or a promise to integrate both of your lives together. One day, of course, like, when you're boyfriend, girlfriend, like, you can't, or whoever you are, or whoever it is, like, you can't expect the other person to act like your husband when he's not even your husband yet, And I think that was one of the mistakes that I perhaps made as well, that I placed him with, I sort of looked at him, I sort of had subconsciously given him roles as if he was my husband, but he wasn't, and he never will be, right? And so why did I have such high expectations for someone who wasn't even ready to commit with me, right? And it's not his fault, it wasn't my ex's fault that he didn't want to commit with me. There are reasons perhaps that he also didn't want to commit with me, because it's a big risk, Of course, like, when you invest your life, when you invest your time and effort and you want to spend the rest of your life with someone, the stakes are high. Like, you could lose that person. Like, if something happens, you could lose your money, you could lose your kids, you could lose many things, you could lose your, I don't know, whatever. And so if you already had kids, it would get more complicated, because then you would have to choose whether the kid would stay with you or your partner, right? The stakes are high, And so that's why commitment is such a big thing. And a lot of people would just stay in a friends with benefits situation rather than actual partnership, or commitment, right? Yeah, so that's one thing. Um, um, and the second thing is, when you're in a relationship with someone, you shouldn't feel the need to mold yourself into a softer version of you, let's say, or into somebody that you don't even feel like that you know. It's a bit ironic for me to say this because who am I to say, I don't even know myself or trust myself that well to even say that I know myself, right? But if you feel like at one point you have to get into an adaptive role, or you have to be a softer version of you so that you can make your partner happy, then, or you have to be in a certain, you have to follow some certain politics or, political belief or any kind of belief, and then your partner would be happy. So if it starts to feel like an ultimatum, whether that you have to make a choice so that this person would be happy, then it just doesn't feel authentic, doesn't it? And it's not just that. It's not just about, molding yourself. That's not right, in my opinion. But also about when you feel like, you shouldn't feel like you should split yourself in half or halves or whatever so that you can be happy, so that you can be in a relationship with someone. You shouldn't feel like you should split yourself into compartments to please this person who wasn't even there when you were young, whom you don't even know is going to be part of your future. At that time I thought that he would be part of my future, that there was potential. But well, my parents, who aren't perfect, just like I am, have been in my life for a long time. Yeah, there were times where my parents and I would get into an argument, where we crossed swords, where we didn't see each other eye to eye, so to speak. But we still stayed strong. We still, in the end, communicate how we felt. And I think communication, something that I didn't used to think was very important until I studied theology and my master's of teaching. Communication is very important, sort of like, you can be accommodating, you can console your partner, there is a difference, right? But there's a difference in accommodating yourself and molding yourself, you know what I mean? Like, you don't turn into the other person. You don't lose yourself. You don't lose access to yourself just because you want to please your partner. Like, you have to have a firm ground of yourself. Because if you don't, then, your boundaries would always get crossed by whoever it is, Like, we have to learn to agree to disagree, right? Because we can't be friends with everyone. We can't get along with, everyone in this world, right? Some people might not even like the way I look or like the way I talk or who I am, I don't know. But that's just reality, isn't it? And so that's the second point. And the third point is, when your partner, or perhaps even yourself, start to intellectualize feelings rather than analyzing it and take the steps to kind of, resolve it, then that's when I feel like you should question whether or not you feel unseen, whether or not it is worth staying in that kind of dynamic, right? And this doesn't just apply to relationships, this is in friendships as well. Um, just very tricky because, I mean, my ex, sometimes he has the tendency to be very, like, he was a bit into history, he was a bit into, like, you know, politics and stuff. But when it comes to analyzing emotions, I'm not saying this like to attack him or anything, I'm just saying that sometimes people have their limits, right? Like, emotions is scary, like, I gotta admit this. Like, even I myself, who, I'm not trying to be arrogant or anything, but as someone who considers herself as an emotionally attuned person, like, I find that, because I work with children too, right? And I work full time, so I see children with various moods, going through various mood swings every day. They're in distress, they're in pain, they're joyful, they're sad, they're full of sorrow, they want to see their mom and dad, or they're crying but they don't even know why, and they don't even tell us why. And so I'm used to working in a space, in childcare, where I'd have to be emotionally available throughout the day. Yeah, there are times where I'd feel tired. There are times where I just want to, like, sit there and just close my eyes and not process anything, because it was just so overwhelming, whatever's going on. But, like, when somebody close to you shares with you about how they feel about, well, I mean, let's say, like let's say, I'm gonna give an example, okay? I don't know if this is a good example, but I'm just gonna say it. So, let's say I say to my partner, I feel like I feel alienated these days, because every time I open social media, there's always, feeds of posts of people getting married, posts of people being in a relationship, and they kind of, look happy-go-lucky or happy, and I start to reflect on my own life, and, like, I just feel like I'm not up to that. And I think a lot of us feel this way, right? So it's not such an uncommon thing to feel alienated, right? Alienated in the sense where, like, you just feel like your life doesn't match up to what's shown in the media, even though what's shown in the media isn't necessarily true. So, in my opinion, like, a partner who is understanding or tries to understand you would say, oh, why do you think, like, what makes you feel what makes you feel alienated, Is there something there that makes you feel inadequate? Is there something maybe in our relationship where, maybe we could improve on? How do I better serve you as a partner? When Charlie Kirk was alive. Okay, I've said Charlie Kirk's name many times in my videos, but yeah, he's left an impression on me, even though many people don't like him. Some of my friends don't even like him as well. There was one thing he said when he was still alive. He would send letters to his wife, and in that letter he would used to say, how can I better serve you as a husband every day? And I just thought it was really sweet, I mean, I've never heard, like, anything like that. I mean, I thought that even if my parents heard that, my parents wouldn't even do that, I think. Like, they would probably just say it's such an old-fashioned thing to do, sending letters and that. My dad doesn't even write down a journal or a diary, I remember when I used to keep, like, a diary entry, and I would write, an entry every day. Sometimes my parents would think that I was weird, and, like, I would just, like, that it's old-fashioned and stuff. But anyway, that's just preference, right? So what I was trying to say is that an emotionally attuned partner, in my opinion, would kind of ask your feelings, how you feel about it, what made you feel upset, and also like why, like what are the like self-reflect, the ability to reflect on the relationship, or if there's something that made like the partner feel that way, right? Feel inadequate maybe, or comparing themselves to other people. But somebody who intellectualizes emotions would probably go by the facts more and just say like, oh, we're living in an atomized society, which is true. I mean, we are living in an atomized society, like alienation is a normal part of being a human, because no matter what religion you follow, no matter which part of the world you are in, you're always gonna experience some level of alienation. And yeah, I mean, that sounds wise, right? I mean, that doesn't sound harmful, so per se on the surface. Like, I would even think somebody who says that actually is wise, actually. But it depends who you're talking to, though. Like, if you're just talking to a friend, or if you're talking, like, I feel like sometimes, now this is really depending, this really depends on the context and the tone, the intonation, and also the intention of the person saying it, because I can't say this is a wrong thing to say, but I feel like there could have been better things to say, right? Because it sort of feels like, yeah, okay, you named the problem, alienation, and you're saying that it's normal to feel alienated. So doesn't it feel more dismissive rather than kind of, a good attempt to resolve your emotions, or help resolve your emotions or the problem? So yeah, that was what I encountered, you know. So that was one thing that kind of made me feel like I was probably always, most of the time, in a state of limbo. Like I was trapped. Like I didn't know how to get out, because I was always like, well, not always, but there were times where I feel like my feelings were dismissed, subtly, even subtly. And one last point. When you feel like, when you are given an ultimatum, like, let's say, an example would be, oh, if you want to be with me, then you have to do this and that. You have to abandon, let's say, like your belongings, or you have to abandon your parents, or you'd have to, get away from a certain group of family and friends, in order to be with that person. When your partner says that to you, giving you an ultimatum, I think that is when you start to question whether your partner is trying to isolate you, where both of you would just live in a kind of a isolated space where nobody would try to get involved with you guys. And now this is tricky. Right? Because like, I can't say this for everyone, and I can't apply this to across contexts sometimes, because like, if you were from like an abusive family, probably, yeah, of course, the safest thing to do is to get away from them, right? And to find good support network. And if your partner is a good support network, can help you provide financial, physical, or emotional security, then being with that partner isn't a bad thing. But if it requires you to isolate yourself, not integrate, when your family and friends actually want you and your partner to kind of, to some level, not entirely of course, integrate your lives with theirs, like joining family dinners, going out with them on some occasions. See, the reason why I can't apply this to all contexts is because, because I come from an Asian family, right? And a lot of us, we're very like family oriented. We're collectivistic. We're a bunch of collectivistic like culture, right? So there was a bit of a cultural difference. So in societies that we're given too much freedom. Like, I mean, not all societies, but I've heard this from somebody, and I think maybe to some extent it might be true. Um, these societies, the people who grew up or were raised in that society, kind of they're estranged, from their families, and they kind of live in isolated communities and spaces. Whereas in Asian culture, that's kind of the opposite. I mean, isn't it? Like, I mean, even like you could say, well, this is not like Asian, like East Asian culture, but like Aboriginal Australians, right? I mean, they live in kind of like clans, right? They would live like with more than 10 people in a house. And I mean, there are pros and cons, and again, like it comes back to knowing what your boundaries are, like what you can accept and what you can't. But that takes experience, and sometimes these experiences isn't just learned, they aren't just picked up from a long-term relationship. You don't have to be with someone for 3 or 4, 7 years to learn what boundaries are. You can be in a situationship or even a friendship, multiple friendships, multiple situationships or casual relationships, to know, like, to know what your values are, right? And it really depends on how much you reflect as well, because like people who have been in long-term relationships don't necessarily always know what they want as well. They probably just get into the relationship because it's convenient, or maybe because it's an arranged marriage, or they were introduced to each other by their parents or something. So yeah, I would say those 4 things, based on my experience, they matter. So it's about self-preservation, self-respect, knowing what you want. Yeah, and again, that takes experience, which is fine. Like, take it one day at a time. You can't figure out what your values are in one day. It takes months, weeks, years to know. And I'm saying this for people who are younger than me, especially because there are 18-year-olds who are way mature than me. There are 18-year-olds who are more accomplished than I am as a 25-year-old. But there are also 25-year-olds. I mean, no offense, but 25-year-olds who just, play video games all day and not even socialize with people or their friends, right? Or don't know how to socialize with people. So that's the tricky part. Like, it all comes down to knowing what resonates with you. So yeah, I would say that those are the things that I've learned from the end of my 4-year relationship with my ex. Well, I prefer not to disclose any details. The relationship has ended, like, yeah. But it was ambiguous. It ended a while back, but it just felt ambiguous because, and it felt like I was kind of like trying to put a label on it, you see, like that oh, I'm convinced that we're like, there's something real going on, and yeah, we did have something real going on, but it was static. It was real in the sense that we did have some memories together, but it wasn't integrated. It wasn't really. See, the reason why I didn't want to disclose, or I felt ashamed to tell people about him, people that I care about, such as my parents, about him, was because exactly the reasons that I have mentioned in the video, right? So yeah, we all make mistakes. I make mistakes, and life is an ongoing journey. Nobody's perfect. And so you shouldn't be critical on yourself, because it's not fair on you. Well, whoever you are. whatever gender you are, you know. I mean, I'm saying this universal, really. Like, you don't, like, this doesn't just apply to like girls, because like I know I'm a girl and I'm speaking about my partner who's a guy, but girls can act, you know, in ways that I don't know. So anyway, um, all right. I hope you found that enlightening. Um, and thank you. Subscribe, like, and comment for more. I'll see you in the next video. Bye.